They never saw her as one of them. To them, Emily was just ordinary. A soft-spoken woman with simple clothes, a quiet job, and a background no one cared to ask about. They smiled politely, but their eyes said everything she didn't belong. Not in their world. Not beside him. For 3 years, Emily kept her head down. She listened. She observed. She endured the quiet digs, the backhanded compliments, the way her name was always spoken with just a touch of condescension. But what they never understood, what they still don't, is that silence doesn't mean surrender. Tonight, surrounded by chandeliers and champagne in a room full of people who think they already know who she is, Emily is going to remind them the quietest person in the room is often the one with the most to say. And once she speaks, nothing will ever be the same. Emily Bennett never planned on marrying into a world of designer gowns and private jets. She grew up in a town so small the corner store was also the post office. Her parents ran a local hardware shop, the kind of place where customers were neighbors and handshakes meant something. Every Friday night they'd treat themselves to take-out pizza and old movies. That was luxury. After college, Emily became a librarian. Not because it was glamorous, but because stories mattered to her. Helping a child fall in love with reading, watching someone's eyes light up when they found the book they didn't know they needed, that to her was meaningful. She lived simply. She lived quietly. And for a long time she believed that was enough. But when she met Ryan Walker, not the billionaire, just the man sipping coffee with no wallet and a crooked smile, everything started to change. It happened on a Tuesday. Emily was at her usual spot, a little coffee shop tucked between the library and the bus station. She liked the quiet there, the way the sunlight spilled across the old wooden tables, the scent of fresh pastries mixing with roasted beans. That's where she saw him, Ryan. Tall, a bit disheveled, flipping through a paperback he clearly wasn't planning to buy. When he reached the counter and realized he'd forgotten his wallet, Emily was already one step ahead. "I've got it," she said with a smile. "Just promise me you'll return the favor." "Someday." He laughed, a little embarrassed, a little charmed. He did come back. Not just with the money, but with conversation curiosity and a quiet pull that made her heartbeat shift. There were no last names, no pedigrees, just two people talking about books and dreams over cups of lukewarm coffee. And somehow, that was enough. They fell in love the way the best stories unfold, slowly, then all at once. Late-night walks after the library closed. Heated debates over classic novels. Laughter over burnt toast and mismatched socks. Ryan never bragged, never flaunted. To Emily, he was just Ryan, curious, kind, endlessly fascinated by the way her mind worked. He'd ask about her childhood, her favorite books, what she feared, what she hoped. And she loved how he listened, really listened. When he finally told her he wanted to build a life with her, he didn't do it with a grand gesture or flashy ring. It was over tea on a rainy Thursday when he quietly asked, "Would it be crazy if I said I want to grow old, reading next to you?" Emily didn't hesitate. She said yes, not to a future of wealth, but to a future of honesty. And that was the beginning of everything. Emily didn't meet Ryan's family until months after they married. He said they were complicated, that they lived in a different world. Emily thought he meant busy, maybe a bit formal. She had no idea. The Walker estate wasn't a home. It was a monument, white columns, marble floors, art that didn't look like art. From the moment she stepped through the front doors, Emily felt at the pause in conversation, the subtle once-over from polished eyes, the way no one asked her a single question that wasn't loaded. Margaret Ryan's mother greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Vanessa, his sister-in-law, eyed her dress like it belonged on clearance. They didn't say much that day. They didn't have to. Emily wasn't one of them. And though no one said it out loud, she heard it in every silence. How could someone like her marry someone like him? It started small. A comment here, a glance there. Margaret would tilt her head and ask. Still working at the little library in the same tone someone might use to ask about a childhood hobby. Vanessa was worse. Her words sparkled like crystal pretty on the surface, razor sharp underneath. It's so refreshing, she'd say, how you're not afraid to wear department store brands. Very authentic. Emily smiled. That quiet, practiced smile people wear when they know the room is watching, when they know the joke is them. Every visit, every dinner became a performance she hadn't auditioned for. Ryan's family had the script. Emily didn't. She laughed at the right moments. She asked polite questions. She let them feel clever. And at night, when she was alone, she'd replay their words not because they hurt, but because she refused to forget. Not yet. Family dinners at the Walkers were never warm. They were rehearsed. Crystal glasses. Courses announced like performances. Conversations choreographed around investments, art auctions, board positions. Emily sat among them, a quiet note in a room full of noise. When she spoke, no one leaned in. When she paused, no one filled the silence. Vanessa had a game. She'd ask Emily about her little book club loud enough for everyone to hear, then glance around for laughter. And it always came polite, tight-lipped, cruel. Margaret never raised her voice. She didn't need to. A single glance from across the table said more than any words. Ryan would squeeze Emily's hand under the table, a silent apology, a poor one. Emily said nothing. She cut her food. She smiled. But in her silence, she was writing chapters, and one day they'd read every word. The first time it happened, Emily thought it was a mistake. A ski trip to Aspen, photos posted all over social media. Matching coats, champagne on mountaintops, the whole family smiling wide. Except for her. No one had mentioned it. Not even Ryan until he saw the pictures and asked, "Did we miss an invitation?" Vanessa laughed. "Oh, didn't we tell you? It was all very last minute." Then it happened again. A private cruise, a weekend in Napa, a cousin's engagement party. Each time, Emily found out after the fact. At first, Ryan tried to explain it away. They're just forgetful. But Emily wasn't. She remembered everything. The way place cards always set her at the far end of the table. The way conversations swirled around her, never toward her. She wasn't just being left out. She was being erased. Quietly. Deliberately. At the next dinner party, Emily arrived early, not by choice, but by anxiety. The dining room was glowing candles flickering against silverware polished to perfection. Laughter echoed from the foyer as guests poured in, embraced, clinked glasses. Margaret greeted everyone by name, hugged the wives, kissed the cheeks of those she deemed worthy. When she reached Emily, it was a nod, a small, efficient nod. At the table, Emily found her seat at the far end next to someone's accountant and a distant cousin who spent the evening checking his watch. Every conversation orbited around her but never landed. Names she didn't know, places she'd never been, deals she wasn't part of. She tried to speak once, a comment about a book someone mentioned. They smiled, paused, then continued as if she hadn't spoken at all. Emily wasn't just unwelcome. She was invisible. The comments always came dressed as compliments. "You have such a wholesome look," one of Margaret's friends once said, eyes sweeping over Emily's modest dress. "So rare these days." Vanessa chimed in, her voice syrup-sweet. "I admire how you don't feel the need to compete. It's brave." At a charity luncheon, a woman leaned in and whispered, "My daughter used to love the library too, until she got serious about her career." Emily smiled. She always smiled. But, inside, something shifted. They weren't admiring her, they were dismissing her, reducing her to a charming novelty, a mascot for simplicity. Her profession wasn't a calling to them, it was a limitation. Her quiet nature wasn't strength, it was smallness. Every word they said carried the same message, "You're not one of us. You never will be." And every time Emily heard them loud and clear, Ryan saw it. Every sidelong glance, every thinly veiled insult, every empty seat next to Emily at family events. He wasn't blind, just quiet. Sometimes he'd squeeze her hand under the table. Sometimes he'd change the subject, steer the conversation away when it turned too sharp. But he never said anything, not to them. And Emily never asked him to. She understood. This was the world that raised him, shaped him, taught him how to blend in, not stand up. But that didn't make it easier. Sometimes she'd catch his eyes across the room full of guilt apology, something that looked like shame. And she'd wonder, did he really see what this silence was costing them both? Love is supposed to protect, but sometimes love stands too far away, and Emily, she was starting to feel the distance. Emily sat quietly at the edge of the long dining table, surrounded by laughter that wasn't meant for her and conversations that danced deliberately around her presence. Not once did she interrupt, defend, or retreat. She simply listened. To them, her silence might have looked like surrender, but inside, Emily was far from defeated. She was absorbing everything, every smug smile, every polished insult wrapped in civility. And in that stillness, a memory flickered. Her grandmother's voice came back to her, gentle and steady. "Your worth doesn't come from what you own, Emily. It shows in how you treat people and the peace you carry in your soul. You don't need to shout to prove anything. Sometimes the quietest voice is the one that changes everything." Emily didn't flinch. She didn't speak. But behind her calm eyes, something was shifting. Because silence, when chosen not imposed, is power in its purest form. It came like it always did. Crisp, white envelope, gold lettering, heavy paper that smelled like money. The Cross Foundation Annual Gala. Emily found it tucked beside Ryan's briefcase one morning. No one had handed it to her. No one had said a word. That night at dinner, Ryan cleared his throat. "The gala's next Saturday," he said gently. "You'll need something formal." Margaret's fork paused mid-air. Vanessa didn't even blink. Emily nodded quiet as ever. Of course. But, hours later, as she passed the upstairs hallway, she heard them. Margaret's voice low but sharp. "She'll embarrass us in front of the Sterlings. Have you seen what she wears?" Vanessa laughed. "Tell her the dress code is black tie optional. Maybe she'll take the hint and stay home." Emily stood in the shadows, heart steady. They weren't discussing a guest. They were discussing a problem, and they didn't know she was listening. They spoke about her like she wasn't family. "She talks about library programs like they matter," Margaret scoffed, "as if literacy is some grand crusade." Vanessa added, "The Sterlings will be there. The Montgomerys. Real families. We can't have her looking like she wandered in from a PTA meeting." Emily didn't move, didn't cry. She just stood there soaking in every syllable. They had made their decision long ago. She wasn't one of them. She was tolerated, not embraced. A blemish on their perfect portraits. And Ryan. He said nothing. At dinner the next night, his voice was careful. "We'll find something elegant for you to wear," he offered, glancing quickly at his mother. Margaret gave a polite smile. "We just want everyone to feel comfortable." But Emily understood. Her comfort wasn't their concern. Their image was. The room was quiet, tense. Ryan looked at her unsure. Margaret sipped her wine, eyes carefully unreadable. Vanessa waited, lips pressed in that practiced smile. Emily placed her fork down, gently folded her napkin, and looked up. "I'd be honored to attend," she said, voice calm and steady. "Thank you for including me." There was a pause, a flicker of confusion. They expected hesitation, maybe protest, not composure. Margaret gave a faint nod. Vanessa blinked. Ryan looked relieved, but no one noticed the shift behind Emily's eyes, because beneath the quiet tone was something they hadn't seen before, not gratitude, not submission, resolve. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. What she felt wasn't anxiety. It was clarity. This gala wouldn't be like the others, and though they didn't know it yet, everything was about to change. The morning of the gala, Emily woke early. Not with nerves, with focus. She brewed her coffee the same way she always did. Fed the cat, answered emails, folded laundry. But in her mind, the evening had already begun. She laid out her dress, deep navy, simple lines tailored just enough to feel intentional. Elegant, but not loud. Her jewelry was quiet. Pearls her grandmother once wore tucked away in a small velvet box she'd almost forgotten. Hair pinned loosely, makeup natural. Nothing screamed for attention, but everything had purpose. By the time Ryan arrived to pick her up, she was ready, completely. He looked at her for a long moment. "You look perfect," he said softly. Emily smiled, not out of pride, but peace. She wasn't dressing to fit in. She was preparing to be seen, and tonight they would see her, all of her. As they stepped into the car, Ryan reached for her hand. His grip was warm, steady, but there was tension in his jaw. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. Emily nodded. "I've never been clearer." The drive to the hotel passed in silence. Outside the windows, the city glittered. Inside the car, the air held something quieter expectation. When they arrived, the grand ballroom was already alive, chandeliers spilling light onto polished floors, violins humming in the background, and a sea of gowns and tuxedos moving like choreography. Ryan exhaled as they entered. No one stared. No one whispered. Emily looked the part. Margaret spotted them first, her eyes scanning Emily from head to toe like a TSA checkpoint. Then a small, approving smile. "Lovely, dear. Not too much, not too little. Just right." It was meant as praise, but it sounded like permission, and Emily didn't come for permission. Emily moved through to the ballroom with quiet grace. She didn't cling to Ryan's arm. She didn't shrink beneath the crystal chandeliers or the watchful eyes. She simply belonged. Or at least that's what they saw. The gown hugged her just right, the navy silk catching light like water. Her posture was composed, elegant, neither shy nor showy. She greeted guests with warm nods, not desperation. She didn't chase conversations. She let them come to her, and they did. Because curiosity, even among the elite, is magnetic. Who was this woman? So quiet, so composed, so unlike the stereotype they'd built in their minds. Vanessa appeared at her side, lips pursed in surprise. "You look stunning, Emily." Emily smiled soft and unreadable. "Thank you." That was all. No overcompensating, no awkward laughter. She didn't need to prove anything. That was the difference, and they felt it. The ballroom sparkled all glass and gold, laughter and legacy. Emily stepped further in her heels, quiet against the marble, her eyes taking everything in without flinching. They were watching, not overtly, never directly. But in this world, judgment wore pearls and practiced smiles. Women glanced at her dress, then at each other. Men looked past her before circling back just long enough to wonder. Margaret floated through the room, introducing Ryan with pride, brushing past Emily with the same grace she might use to set down a glass. And Emily. She didn't chase after her. She accepted a glass of champagne from a waiter. She stood near the floral centerpiece. She waited. Because she knew what they saw, someone too polished to ignore but too unfamiliar to place. Not one of theirs, not quite. Yet somehow, unshakably present. That alone unsettled them more than they'd admit. Margaret approached with her signature poise, a flute of champagne in one hand, expectation in the other. She stopped in front of Emily, offering a smile so polished it could have been rehearsed. "Emily, dear," she said, voice low and sweet. "How lovely you look tonight. Not too much, not too little. Just right." It was meant to flatter, but it didn't. Because what Margaret really meant was, "You've finally figured out how not to embarrass us." Emily nodded graciously. "I'm glad you think so." Vanessa lingered nearby, pretending to admire the floral arrangements, but her eyes were locked on Emily, searching for something to pick apart. But there was nothing. No ruffles, no bright colors, no mismatched tone to mock. Emily had given them exactly what they wanted, and in doing so, she took something back control. Because when you meet their expectations on your own terms, you change the game. Introductions came quickly, as they always did at these events. Margaret led Emily through clusters of board members and donors, smiling tightly, delivering her line with mechanical precision. "This is Emily," she'd say, hand resting lightly on Emily's back. "She works at a library. Isn't that lovely?" Always the same tone. That delicate pause before library, that inflection on lovely, the kind that wrapped condescension in lace. Emily shook hands. She smiled. She said all the right things, but inside she counted them. Each time her identity was reduced to a quaint little footnote. Each time her profession became a punchline in pearls. They weren't introducing her. They were containing her, framing her as safe, harmless, something decorative. But they didn't realize you can't package a storm and expect it to stay quiet. Vanessa appeared at Emily's side like clockwork perfume, perfect smile sharper than glass. "Oh, Emily, you simply must meet the Sterlings," she said, already guiding her across the ballroom. "They're very important to the foundation." Emily followed quiet and steady. "They own half the buildings downtown," Vanessa continued. "And Patricia chairs 3 charity boards. They're quite the inspiration." The implication was clear. "Take notes." They reached a semicircle of tailored suits and designer gowns. Vanessa gestured, all grace and sugar. "This is Emily Ryan's wife," she said. "She works at a local library." That word again. Local. Not prestigious, not impressive, just small. Patricia Sterling smiled, eyes cool and distant. "Oh, how quaint. Books must be so relaxing." Emily nodded. "They can be." But inside she knew this wasn't an introduction. It was an audition, and the stage was rigged. Richard Sterling joined the conversation like a man stepping onto a podium, chest forward, voice rich with self-importance. "So, you're the one keeping our city literate," he said with a chuckle, swirling his wine. "Must be quite the shift, going from small-town simplicity to this." Emily smiled politely. "It has its moments." He leaned in slightly, eyes gleaming with smug charm. "I imagine you feel grateful for everything Ryan's family has given you. This world, these connections, they're not easy to come by. Grateful, like she'd been rescued, adopted, upgraded." Patricia added, "It's refreshing, really. So many young women chase status. But you seem perfectly content playing a supporting role." Vanessa, right on cue, murmured, "She knows her place. That's what makes her so endearing." Emily's smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes cooled. She wasn't flattered. She was done pretending. Patricia took a slow sip of champagne, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "I imagine your work must be so peaceful," she said. "No board meetings, no deadlines, no pressure, just stories." Emily nodded. "Stories are powerful." Patricia chuckled. "Of course, dear. It's just charming, like a window into a simpler time." Vanessa leaned in with faux admiration. "And she still shops at regular stores. Can you believe that? So grounded." The group laughed soft and rehearsed, not cruel on the surface, but cutting underneath. They didn't hate Emily. They diminished her, turned her life into decoration, something to admire from above like a vintage trinket on a shelf. Emily stood there steady as ever, her smile unwavering. But beneath it, a quiet truth pulsed. They saw her life as small, but they were about to learn how deep it truly ran. Richard tilted his glass toward Emily, eyes twinkling with faux charm. "You must wake up every day feeling lucky," he said. "To have married into a family like the Walkers, it's not every day a man of Ryan's standing brings someone from humble beginnings into his world." He meant it as a compliment. Emily held his gaze steady. "Ryan and I married for love." Richard chuckled. Of course, but love needs support, doesn't it? Resources, guidance, structure. Families like this provide that." Vanessa placed a manicured hand on Emily's arm. "What he means is you've adjusted beautifully. You've embraced your role with such grace." The message couldn't be clearer. "Be grateful. Stay in line. Remember who gave you this life." Emily didn't flinch. She simply smiled, but inside something sharpened. They thought she was lucky to be chosen. They had no idea who she really was. Emily stood there calm as ever, her champagne untouched, her smile still soft. But her eyes, they had changed. While the Sterlings prattled on about real estate and art auctions, she wasn't listening anymore. She was watching. The way Richard leaned back, speaking like a man delivering a lecture. The way Patricia rarely looked her in the eye. The way Vanessa lingered not out of care but control. They mistook her silence for passivity. But Emily was beyond hurt now. She was done absorbing, done nodding. In that moment, something clicked into place. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. Every slight, every laugh, every manufactured compliment they had been stacking bricks around her, but what they didn't realize was this. While they were building a box to keep her small, Emily had been building a door, and she was about to open it. Dinner was called. The guests flowed into the grand hall like silk chatter. Rising silverware, gleaming names printed in gold at each seat. Emily followed the slow procession, eyes scanning the place cards. Ryan's name sat neatly near the center beside board members and city officials. Hers, table 12, near the kitchen doors. Sandwiched between the foundation's accountant and a junior event coordinator who looked like she wanted to disappear. Emily sat without complaint. She folded her napkin. She thanked the waiter. Across the room, she saw Margaret glance at her, and then look away. This wasn't an accident. This was placement, position, a reminder. You are not one of us. And yet, as Emily picked up her glass and smiled across the table, there was no bitterness in her. Only certainty, because the further they pushed her out, the clearer her path became. The lights dimmed. Applause echoed as Richard Sterling took the stage. He adjusted his cufflinks, smiled like a man accustomed to being listened to, and began. He spoke of legacy, of tradition, of responsibility passed down through generations. Then his voice shifted firmer, colder. It is crucial, he said, scanning the room, that leadership remain in the hands of those who understand it. Not everyone is built to guide. Some are meant to serve quietly with grace, and there is no shame in that. At table 12, Emily sat perfectly still. Around her, a few guests shifted uncomfortably. A journalist nearby stopped eating. Richard's words weren't just philosophy. They were warning shots, a public reminder of the unspoken rule. Some people belong in the spotlight. Others should know their place. Emily's fingers tightened around her fork. They weren't just dismissing her, they were daring her. The room erupted in applause. Not loud, not joyful, just expected. A polite rhythm of approval, rehearsed and hollow. Margaret nodded, expression serene. Vanessa's smile stretched smug and satisfied. She leaned toward Patricia and whispered something behind a manicured hand. They both laughed. Across the ballroom, Ryan glanced toward Emily's table, his smile faltering. Emily didn't clap. She simply looked at Richard Sterling, still standing on stage, still soaking in the attention like it belonged to him. Her heart wasn't racing. Her hands didn't shake. She had imagined this moment before, but not like this, not with so much stillness inside her, because now she understood. This wasn't their night. It was hers. And they had no idea the speech they would remember wasn't his. It hadn't started yet, but it was coming. As the applause faded, Vanessa reappeared beside Emily's chair like a shadow with perfect posture. She leaned in, voice light, sweetened with artificial warmth. "You've done beautifully tonight," she said. "Truly, you're so composed. So grounded." Emily looked at her expression, unreadable. Vanessa smiled wider. "That's what makes you special, you know. You don't try to be something you're not. You understand your role in Ryan's life. It's admirable." Around them, silver clinked against china. Conversations picked back up, but the air between them stayed still. Vanessa meant it as praise, as confirmation, as closure. But what she didn't realize was that she'd just lit the final match. Emily set down her glass, her movement deliberate, controlled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because in that moment the silence cracked, and Emily was done playing small. It was the way Vanessa said it sweetly with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Emily's always been so grounded. She knows her place, and that's what makes her so lovable. Laughter rippled around the table, soft and practiced. That was it. Emily set down her champagne glass not with anger, but with calm, deliberate grace. She stood. All conversations around her faltered. Heads turned. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Thank you," she said, for finally making it clear. Eyes blinked. A few smiles froze mid-expression. "I've listened to all of it for 3 years. The jokes, the whispers, the way you speak about people like they exist to make you feel bigger. But tonight, I think it's time you heard from me." And just like that, the room changed. Emily let the silence stretch not awkward, but intentional. A space heavy enough for truth. Then she smiled. Not the practiced one they all knew, but something calmer, stronger. "I want to thank you," she said, voice steady. "All of you." Gasps were exchanged in glances. Confusion flickered across Margaret's face. "For showing me exactly how this world works, for reminding me again and again what you value, and more importantly, what you don't." She turned, slightly sweeping her gaze across the tables, her tone almost gracious. "It's been an education, far more revealing than I expected when I first married into this family." She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to, because her clarity hit harder than rage ever could, and they were listening now, not out of politeness, but out of fear of what might come next. Emily let her words settle like dust falling in a room too pristine for truth. Then she said, quieter now, but every syllable crystal clear. "You've all made your judgments. About how I dress, where I come from, what I do." She paused, eyes locking with Richard, then Margaret, then Vanessa. "But in 3 years, not a single one of you ever asked who I am." A murmur rippled, soft and uneasy. "You've built entire stories around the version of me that fit your narrative, the small-town librarian, the charity case, the outsider." She smiled again gently. "And I let you, because sometimes it's more revealing to watch who people become when they think you're beneath them." Vanessa's smile cracked. Margaret looked suddenly pale, and still Emily's voice remained calm, measured, because the truth wasn't coming in anger, it was coming like light. The ballroom held its breath. Emily glanced once at Ryan, who stood frozen eyes wide as if seeing her for the first time. Then she turned back to the crowd, her voice still soft but now edged with quiet finality. "My name," she said, "is Emily Montgomery." A beat of silence. Then the name sank in. Gasps. Glasses paused mid-sip. Heads whipped around. Richard Sterling's smile evaporated. Patricia's hand clutched her necklace. Margaret. She didn't blink, just stared, stunned into stillness. Because the Montgomery name wasn't just familiar. It was legacy. Old money. Quiet power. The kind of name their charities whispered, thanks to the kind they courted never questioned. And suddenly, the librarian they'd dismissed wasn't small at all. She had just been silent. Until now. The silence didn't stay silent for long. It shifted into gasps, into hurried whispers, into the sharp clink of a champagne flute nervously set down too hard. Vanessa's face drained of color. That's not possible," she stammered. "The Montgomerys are—" "Exactly," Emily replied, not unkindly. "And I've never stopped being one." Margaret's lips parted, but no words came. Only calculation flickered in her eyes, too late, too slow. Even the staff had paused. Waiters frozen, mid-pour musicians faltering in their notes. The room was no longer a gala, it was a reckoning. Emily stood at the center, composed as ever while the world around her recalibrated. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't asked for attention. She'd simply told the truth. And truth, when it arrives without apology, has a weight no one can ignore. Emily didn't move. She didn't need to. The room moved around her. "My great-grandfather," she began, "founded the Montgomery Foundation in 1924. Her voice was clear, unwavering. "For nearly a century, we've quietly funded libraries' literacy programs and education initiatives across the country, including this one." She looked at Richard Sterling. "The Cross Foundation has received annual grants from us for the past 7 years. then to Margaret. Funding that until tonight I personally approved. The room rippled again, not with sound, but with realization. This wasn't just a name drop. This was a redirection of power. Everything they thought they controlled the money. The image, the status, was now fragile under the weight of a truth they'd never bothered to discover. They thought she was decoration, but Emily had always been infrastructure. Emily reached into her small evening clutch and pulled out her phone. Calmly, precisely, she dialed. The line rang once. James. It's Emily. Prepare the formal letter first thing Monday. Every ear strained to hear. We'll be withdrawing all Montgomery Foundation support from the Cross Foundation effective immediately. A collective gasp swept through the room. Forks dropped. Murmurs rose like wind through trees. Emily ended the call without hesitation, then looked back at the stunned faces around her. We'll be redirecting those funds, she said, to a new initiative, one that supports education for people from humble backgrounds. People with integrity. People who know how to treat others with dignity. Her voice didn't shake, because this wasn't revenge, it was realignment. The power had always been hers. Tonight, she simply stopped lending it. Emily's voice softened, but her presence only grew stronger. I'm not doing this to humiliate anyone, she said. I'm doing it because it's time. She glanced around the ballroom, this cathedral of status and perfection, and then spoke from somewhere deeper. For 3 years, I let you underestimate me, and that was my choice. Because I needed to see for myself what power looks like when it's hollow. A pause. I'm not taking our support away because I'm angry. I'm doing it because I believe in something better. Her mind drifted briefly to the quiet corner of her library where a little girl once clutched a worn paperback with shining eyes. I want to learn to help my mom open a bakery one day. That's who Emily stood for now, not the elites in ballrooms, but the quiet dreams waiting in silence. Ryan stepped forward. He hadn't moved during her speech, not out of shock, but out of awe. Now, as the silence settled again, he found his voice. Emily, he said, not quietly but clearly for everyone to hear. I owe you an apology. He turned toward his family, toward Margaret, Vanessa, the Sterlings, all of them, for staying silent when I should have stood up, for letting you carry Grace alone. His jaw tightened. She showed more dignity in 3 years than most of us have in a lifetime. Margaret's face tightened. Ryan, this is... No, he cut in gentle but firm. You don't get to dismiss her. Not anymore. He looked at Emily. She loved me when she thought I had nothing. She never needed my name. Then louder, but tonight you all learned I needed hers. Emily didn't smile out of triumph. She smiled because the weight was finally gone. Not the stares, not the whispers, but the years of biting her tongue so others could feel taller. She turned to the ballroom one last time. Her voice was soft, almost tender. My grandmother used to say real power isn't how loudly you speak. It's how gently you lift others when no one's watching. Then she took Ryan's hand, and together they walked out past crystal chandeliers, past startled faces, past every version of the story that had never included her truth. Out into the cool night air. She didn't look back, because she no longer needed to. And if you've ever sat quietly in a room where you were made to feel small, remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one rewriting the story. Let yours begin.